My parents never hit me. They didn't lock me in a basement. There were no bruises, no after-school counselors whispering questions. But I grew up knowing very clearly that love had terms. You should be grateful we let you stay here. That sentence was my lullaby. It came after bad grades, after good grades, when I was too quiet, too loud, when I forgot to clean the kitchen. When I stood up for myself, it came often, casually, weaponized like a reflex. The house we lived in wasn't a mansion, but it was large enough, quiet enough, clean enough for my parents to remind me how much better off I was than other kids. You think you're suffering? Some people don't even have a home. That sentence. That one stung more than any slap ever could. Because it made me feel guilty for hurting. I wasn't abused, but I wasn't free either. Every choice was theirs. My clothes, my friends, my bedtime, even in high school. They didn't raise me, they managed me. My mother called it discipline. My father called it structure. I called it walking on glass barefoot every day of my life. We weren't close. We weren't even affectionate. If I asked too many questions, I was mouthy. If I cried, I was dramatic. If I didn't cry, I was cold. I couldn't win. I just learned to disappear, quietly, neatly, gratefully. By high school, I understood the rules of survival. Get good grades, don't challenge them. Say thank you even when you're being punished for something that wasn't your fault. Don't mention anxiety. Don't say no. Don't talk about what you want. What I wanted didn't matter. The house wasn't mine. The love wasn't mine. Even my presence was conditional. You live under our roof, my mom would say. You live by our rules. And so I became obedient. On the outside, inside I started building escape plans. Not dramatic ones. No midnight bus tickets or running away. Just quiet calculations. What colleges offered the most aid? How far could I go on a scholarship? Could I work 2 jobs and still pass my classes? Because I knew one thing for certain, I wouldn't be allowed to stay if I failed to serve a purpose. I remember the day I got accepted to university. Full tuition scholarship, out-of-state psychology program. I waited until dinner to tell them. I thought maybe this would be the moment they said they were proud of me. Instead, my mother stared at the acceptance letter and said, psychology. That's not a real career. My father didn't even look up from his plate. No congratulations, no joy, just silence. Then well, you chose this path. Don't expect help. That night, I lay in bed, listening to the same old creak of the hallway floor. Same shadows under the door, same house, same prison. Except now I knew for certain I wasn't a daughter. I was a tenant one late payment away from being kicked out. So I stopped asking for anything. I packed for college alone. No send-off, no hug, no good luck. Just my dad carrying 1 box to the car. Just my mom reminding me not to embarrass them. And just like that, I was gone, and they were glad. But here's the thing about growing up in someone else's house. You never really believe any place will belong to you. You carry the echo of borrowed space. You carry the guilt of existing. And even when you leave, you still flinch every time someone says, "You're lucky to be here." I arrived on campus with a full scholarship 1 suitcase and a toothbrush in a Ziploc bag. Other freshmen had their parents trailing behind them, arms full of Target bags and lamps and storage bins. Mine had dropped me off at the curb. No hug, no final advice, just don't screw it up. And then the car door slammed. I stood there in the noise of everyone else's joy and realized I was alone. College was supposed to be a new start, and in some ways it was. I was free to sleep when I wanted, eat what I wanted, study what I wanted. But freedom, it turns out, is expensive. I worked 2 part-time jobs right away. By the 2nd semester, I added a 3rd. Campus library in the mornings, coffee shop in the afternoons, weekends at a student call center begging alumni to donate to programs I couldn't afford to join. I skipped meals regularly, not because I forgot, because I had to. I learned that a sleeve of crackers could stretch across 3 days if I planned carefully. I went to free campus events for the food. I told people I wasn't hungry when they invited me out. I got good at pretending. My classes were fine. I kept my grades up. That was never the hard part. The hard part was doing it in silence. My phone didn't ring. No one checked in. No how are you? No we miss you. At first, I called home once a week, then once a month. Then I stopped. I sent one photo after my first A-plus paper. My mom replied, "Hope you're not neglecting your other classes." I never sent another. The financial aid office knew me by name. I became an expert at hunting grants, emergency food stipends, one-time textbook reimbursements. Still, there were weeks I had to choose between clean laundry or printer credits. I washed my hair with dish soap once, duct-taped the sole of my shoe twice, slept in a library cubicle more times than I can count. But I never stopped, because stopping would mean going back. And there was no back, only prove them wrong. There was a girl in my psych seminar who wore a gold necklace that said "Daddy's Girl." I used to stare at it, not out of envy, just confusion. I couldn't imagine what it felt like to be wanted. On my 21st birthday, I sat on the roof of the dorm with a can of off-brand soda and watched the sun go down behind the gym. I hadn't told anyone it was my birthday, but part of me thought maybe someone from home would call. Not even to say happy birthday, just anything. They didn't. I turned my phone off that night, and somehow that hurt less than leaving it on. I graduated with honors, top 3% of my program. My thesis was selected for departmental archive. My advisor wrote me a letter that made me cry in the back of the library. I walked across the stage with a fake smile and a borrowed gown. No one was in the audience for me. The girl ahead of me had a cheering section that brought air horns. My name was read, and there was silence. I smiled anyway. That's what you do. After the ceremony, I asked a stranger to take my picture. He did. I still have it. I'm smiling. Hair slightly frizzy from the humidity. Behind me is a sea of families and flowers and hugs. None of them mine. I got a small check from my on-campus job. I used it to buy a single cupcake from the student bakery. Sat on a bench, ate it slowly. It tasted like freedom and grief. No one ever taught me how to celebrate myself. But that day I tried. The day after graduation, I woke up on a friend's couch with a stiff neck and no idea what came next. My lease had ended. My meal plan had expired. My student email was deactivated within 72 hours. The university had finished with me, and just like that, I was no one again. I didn't have a job. I'd sent out over 40 applications in the past month. Therapy assistant, admin support, outreach coordinator, anything remotely tied to psychology or social services. No one replied, or worse, they replied with form letters. "Thank you for your interest. We've selected other candidates. You're incredibly talented, but..." That last one stung the most. If I was so talented, why was I broke? The friend whose couch I was crashing on let me stay for 2 weeks, no questions asked. She had a spare blanket and a kind heart, and I owe her more than she knows. I applied for minimum wage jobs while waiting for a real offer. Got one at a grocery store stocking shelves on the night shift. I told myself it was temporary, but temporary started to look like forever. I learned to stretch $50 across 2 weeks. Ramen again. Bananas when they were on sale. Canned beans, pasta, repeat. I'd walk past cafes and see people sipping coffee that cost more than my whole lunch. I didn't resent them. I just couldn't imagine being one of them. There was a moment, and I remember it clearly, when I stood in a drugstore holding a pack of tampons and a bottle of ibuprofen, trying to decide which one I needed more. That's what poverty does. It forces you to choose between things that should never be in conflict. I picked the ibuprofen and used tissues in place of dignity. My parents didn't call, not that I expected them to, but there were nights I stared at my phone, willing it to light up. Just one message, one "how are you?" Even one "I told you so," nothing. It was like I never existed. I eventually found a room to rent cheap, no lease, just cash and trust. The ceiling leaked. The stove was temperamental. The neighbors screamed at each other through the walls. But it was 4 walls and a door that locked, and it was mine. I kept applying. Every night after work, I'd sit cross-legged on the floor with my laptop and a bowl of cheap cereal and rewrite cover letters. I tailored each one. I triple-checked typos. I practiced fake smiles for interviews I never got. It was like screaming into a void, but I kept doing it, because giving up meant going back, and going back wasn't an option. One night I got an interview. It was for a part-time admin position at a community counseling center. No glamour, no therapy work, just paperwork, phones, scheduling. But it was in the right field, and I needed this, badly. I wore my only button-up shirt, ironed it with a flat iron, wiped my shoes with paper towels, and prayed no one would notice the wear. I shook hands with sweaty palms and answered every question like it might save my life. And 2 days later, I got the call. They offered me the job. It wasn't much. The pay was barely above minimum wage, no benefits, no guarantee of hours. But it was something, a door, not wide open, not golden, just unlocked. For once. I started working there the next week, filed intake forms, took phone calls from clients in crisis, got yelled at by people who were hurting and didn't know where else to put their pain. I never took it personally because I knew what it felt like to have no one to talk to. The job wasn't easy, but I didn't care. I was finally moving, slowly, quietly, but forward. Every paycheck I put $20 into a savings envelope I kept under my mattress. Not for emergencies, not for rent, for me, just in case one day I wanted to do more than survive. I didn't tell my parents about the job, not because I was hiding, because I no longer needed their silence to mean anything. Time didn't speed up. I just started measuring it differently, not by semesters or grades, but by paychecks, by bills. By the way the rent envelope slid under my landlord's door, on time every month with my name misspelled. I wasn't making much, but it was more than I'd ever had. At the counseling center, I went from part-time to full-time. Then I took on weekends. Then I started covering for the receptionist who left mid-shift one day and never came back. Eventually, they gave me her desk. I bought a real office mug. I printed my name on a label and stuck it to the file cabinet. It peeled at the edges, but I left it there. Proof. I moved into a better place, still small, still modest, but the kind where nothing leaks when it rains. Where I could hear myself think. Where I could finally sleep through the night without bracing for footsteps in the hallway. I didn't furnish it all at once, just one thing at a time. A second-hand couch, a lamp with a warm light, a plant I named despite knowing it would die in 2 months. It lasted 4. There were mornings I'd make toast and coffee and sit at my tiny table and think. So this is what peace tastes like. I didn't become a different person. I didn't forget anything. But the anger that once buzzed under my skin began to quiet. I stopped checking my phone hoping for a message. I stopped refreshing their profiles. I stopped waiting for anything from them at all. And that felt like power. I even started thinking about the future. Not in the desperate survivalist way I used to, but with actual planning. I opened a savings account, started tracking my expenses, downloaded budgeting spreadsheets. I made a rule 10% of every paycheck, no matter how small, goes into savings. Not because I wanted to be rich, but because I never wanted to be scared again. Then, one Tuesday morning, something strange happened. I was going through work emails, deleting spam, when I saw a subject line that made my heart hiccup. Pre-foreclosure public notice, address redacted. I almost deleted it without reading, but something about it made me pause. I clicked, and there it was, my childhood home. It was listed as pre-foreclosure. The bank was preparing to seize it, auction date pending, minimum bid laughably low. Lower than the cost of my 4 years of college. I stared at the screen, feeling nothing at first, just silence. Then the images loaded, the porch, the shutters, that off-white door I had slammed so many times in my head, but never in real life. I knew every crack in that house, every sound it made, every place I used to hide my journals. It was a house that never loved me, but still it was home once, and now it was on clearance. I closed the tab, then opened it again 10 minutes later. I didn't know if they still lived there. We hadn't spoken in years, not even to fight. But the idea that it might belong to someone else, some stranger who would repaint the walls, tear up the carpet, rip it from the roots, like it was just another property. That unsettled me more than I expected. I wasn't thinking about revenge, or nostalgia, or even justice. Just this quiet, persistent hum. I know this house. And now it's vulnerable, just like I once was. I didn't make a decision that day, but I kept the tab open all week. And I started wondering for the first time in a long time, and not what they would do next, but what I would. I told no one, not my roommate, not my coworkers, not even the friend who once let me sleep on her couch. It wasn't a secret. It just felt personal, private, like a wound I was finally stitching shut. The listing stayed up for 3 weeks. Every day I'd refresh it, just to see if someone else had claimed it. They hadn't. It was like the house was waiting, like it knew. I didn't rush. I wasn't impulsive. I researched everything. Foreclosure processes, property taxes, mortgage conditions, hidden liens. I made spreadsheets. I asked a real estate lawyer for a consult. I triple-checked my credit score. I knew what I was doing. And that's what made it so surreal. Because I had grown up in that house, never feeling like I belonged, never feeling like I had a voice. Now I was reading loan terms, running numbers, setting my own limits. My bank manager raised an eyebrow when I mentioned the address. "Are you sure?" she asked. "Foreclosures are messy." And that area, I'm sure, I said. And I was, not because I loved the house, but because I wanted to stop flinching every time I thought about it. I made the offer on a Tuesday, under market value, modest, clean, no emotion in the paperwork. 3 days later, the bank accepted, no questions. Just like that, it was mine. I sat on my floor that night, staring at the confirmation email on my laptop, surrounded by second-hand furniture and half-wilted plants. No champagne, no tears, just stillness. The kind of stillness that used to terrify me because it meant something was about to break, but nothing broke. Not this time. This. I didn't go see the house right away. I didn't drive by it, didn't visit, didn't even Google map it. I just sat with the knowledge that the house, the place where I was once told I wasn't welcome now, had my name on the deed. No more permission, no more borrowed space, no more gratitude owed, just ownership, quiet, simple, legal. I wasn't sure if my parents still lived there. Foreclosure notices had gone out. The auction was public. Anyone with an internet connection could have seen it. And if they didn't know, well, that wasn't my responsibility anymore. Weeks passed before I heard anything. Then one day I got an email, no greeting, no subject, just this: "Did you really buy the house?" It was from my mother. I didn't reply, not out of spite, but because I needed time to choose my words the way they had always chosen power. When I finally wrote back, I kept it short. "Yes, I'm the legal owner now. If you're still living there, we can discuss options. No anger, no blame, just boundaries." She didn't respond for days. Then came the second message, this one longer, accusatory, rambling, furious. "How could you do this to us? This is still our home. You don't understand what you're doing. You've always wanted to take from us. You were never grateful. You were never enough." I read it 3 times. Not because it hurt, because it didn't. And that shocked me. For the first time in my life, her words slid off me like water. No guilt, no second guessing, no obligation to fix what I didn't break. I didn't reply. Instead, I called a lawyer, drew up a formal lease, 12 months, modest rent, legal terms, a contract, not revenge, not charity, just structure, the thing they claimed to value. I sent the papers via certified mail, attached a note. "You may stay if you choose to live on my terms." They signed the lease. They didn't say thank you. They didn't say anything. Just a signature, a date, a scrawl that looked more like surrender than agreement. And just like that, my parents became my tenants. I didn't visit the house. There was no ceremony, no key handover, no awkward reunion, just documents, logistics, quiet legalities that did what decades of conversation never could establish boundaries. They stayed, and I stayed away. For a while there was silence. A whole month passed without a single message. No complaints, no insults, no late payments. I thought maybe, just maybe, they understood. Not accepted, not respected, but understood that the dynamic had changed, that I wasn't a daughter they could control anymore, that I was now the owner of the house, of the rules, of myself. Then came the letters, not to me, to the bank, to the utilities, to the neighborhood association, to anyone who might listen. They disputed the foreclosure, claimed they were defrauded, claimed I had manipulated the process, claimed I was exploiting them. They called me a liar, a traitor, a thief. They didn't use my name, just her, like I was an illness that infected the property. It was almost funny. The people who had told me, again and again, that I was nothing without them, now couldn't stand the fact that I existed without them at all. I responded the only way I knew how professionally. I hired a property manager, gave him the lease, told him to enforce it by the book. I stepped back, detached, distant, safe. But detachment isn't the same as immunity, because no matter how many layers of paperwork you add, some wounds don't stay buried. I started getting voicemails, blocked numbers, voiced rage. You think you're better than us now. This house was ours before you were even born. If we'd known you'd turn out like this, we never would have kept you. It should have shattered me. Once it would have. But this time, all I felt was confirmation. They hadn't changed. They never would. One day, I got a voicemail from my father. He rarely spoke, even when I lived under his roof. But here he was 3 minutes and 41 seconds of seething blame. He said I was poison, said I had stolen everything from them, said I was ungrateful, unfit, and unnecessary. I replayed it once, then deleted it. There was no fight, no explosive showdown, no screaming on the lawn, just silence again. But this time it wasn't mine, it was theirs. They had run out of ways to win. Eventually, the property manager informed me they stopped paying rent, refused entry for inspection, threatened legal action with no legal basis. I gave them 30 days' notice, filed the paperwork, followed the law. It was all so simple, so boring. I thought revenge would feel powerful, but this wasn't revenge. This was administration. They moved out on day 28, left trash bags full of clothes in the garage, ripped a curtain rod out of the wall, left the fridge open, not broken, just petty. Like they wanted the house to feel empty again. But it didn't. Because when I walked in for the first time in years, it didn't feel like theirs anymore. It didn't feel like mine either. It just felt neutral, quiet, free. I stood in the middle of the living room where I used to be told to lower my voice. I touched the wall where I once leaned to listen for footsteps. I looked at the ceiling, half expecting it to echo with old words like, be grateful, obey, don't embarrass us. But there was nothing, just silence, not the kind that punishes, the kind that releases. The house was quiet again, but this time it wasn't suffocating. It didn't echo with unspoken rules or footsteps that made my chest tighten. It was just still, the kind of quiet that doesn't demand an apology. I stood in the kitchen and stared at the place where the old calendar used to hang. Every square used to be filled with obligations, dentist appointments, volunteer shifts, church potlucks rules I never helped write. Now it was blank, empty in a way that felt like possibility. I thought owning the house would feel like justice. It didn't. It felt like cleaning up someone else's mess again. But this time I wasn't doing it to be loved, or forgiven, or noticed. I was doing it because I could, because I knew how to clean, because I wasn't the child in the hallway anymore waiting to be let back in. I fixed the broken railing on the porch, replaced the lock, had the carpets professionally cleaned, not because they were dirty, but because I didn't want them to smell like memory. I didn't tell anyone it was mine, not my coworkers, not my friends, not even the bank manager who complimented me on my turnaround. Because this wasn't a trophy, it was just closure in the shape of a mortgage. For a while, I thought I'd move in, make it mine, start fresh, paint the walls, plant something in the yard, finally take up space without asking. But every time I stepped inside, I felt like a visitor in my own life. Not because it wasn't home, because it never had been. So I made a different decision. I rented it out, found a young couple, quiet, respectful, just starting out. The kind of people who still believed in welcome mats and porch lights. They moved in 2 months later, and I moved on. I didn't leave town out of spite, or fear, or to chase anything. I just let go of the hallway, of the voice in my head, of the weight I carried so long I forgot it wasn't mine. My parents never reached out again, not to ask for the house back, not to say thank you, not to say goodbye, and that was okay. Because by then, I had stopped needing closure from people who refused to give it. One night, I got a letter in the mail. No return address. Sloppy handwriting. It just said you always thought you were better than us. You're not. No name, no signature. I didn't throw it away. I burned it. And I watched the paper curl and blacken in the sink and thought, that's the last time their voice will live in my house. It's been over a year. The house is still there, freshly painted now, with different flowers in the yard. The porch light works. The mailbox doesn't tilt anymore. There are laughter sounds when I walk by sometimes. They belong to someone else. Good. I live 3 neighborhoods away in an apartment with peeling paint and good sunlight. It's not big, but it's mine. No one checks if I've done the dishes. No one reminds me how much I owe them just for being alive. I cook for myself. I forget to do laundry. I read books late into the night without being told to turn off the light. Sometimes I still wake up thinking I've done something wrong, but then I look around and realize I'm safe. People ask about my family sometimes, at work, on dates, in line at the DMV. I say we're not close, and I leave it at that. Some press, most don't. If they do, I tell the truth, not the details, not the drama. Just this I had to choose, between being a good daughter and being okay. I chose being okay. I don't wish them harm. I don't even wish they'd come back. I just hope they're somewhere, still, quiet, far away from me. No more letters, no more voicemails, no more ghosts. I still think about the girl I used to be, the one who stood in the hallway holding her breath, trying not to be noticed, the one who thought love had to be earned through obedience, the one who believed a roof over her head meant she owed the world for every breath she took. I wish I could hug her, tell her she doesn't have to try so hard, that her worth doesn't come from endurance, that survival isn't the goal, it's the beginning. She wouldn't believe me, of course, but maybe one day she would see what I built and understand the house was never the point. Not the ownership, not the keys, not the contract. The point was this: I'm not waiting in the hallway anymore. I live where the light reaches every corner. I speak when I want to speak. I stay when I choose to stay. I leave when it hurts. And I do not ask permission, not anymore.